Circa 1992, Hitchens faxed his copy through as regards Columbus Day. If you'll permit me the conceit of a posthumous critique, I'll paraphrase.
You are listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. On this episode, I chat with Aukai Ligairi about Comply Resist. We chat about Aukai's career as a filmmaker, his family history, growing up in Hawaii, his love of propaganda, and a deep dive into the song Comply Resist. Aukai made a cover of Comply Resist under the moniker Savage Nobles, a band he is in the early stages of developing. I'm so excited to bring you this part one of Comply Resist. It feels like this song has been procrastinated for a long time on this podcast, and I'm so delighted that we are finally able to discuss it. We have much more Comply Resist in the works, too. Aukai is on Twitter and Instagram at AukaiViti. That's AUKAIVITI. So go say hi. Please enjoy this cover and conversation on Comply Resist with Aukai Ligairi.
My colorful exotic friend, respectable, well-spoken, I like the rest of them. As you know, I'm colorblind. Your credit to your kind, the kind. Silly talk of a resurgence, ceremony communing with an unconquered natural world. Tell me, where is your gratitude for all we've done for you? Epoch we bestowed upon the savage empty lands, well, of course mistakes were made, but as far as human progress goes, welcome to a slightly higher plane of innovation and opportunity for your trampled communities, the treaties that we broke, the lands that we filched, the settlements put to the torch, the children we abused, all for your own good, of course. So happens, be the way history has been made. Just don't play with the toy gun, or translate without signaling. Don't comply, don't resist, 'cause it don't make a difference. Comply, resist. No difference. Resist, comply. You die. The funny names you give your kids, the silly ways you do your hair, the stronger music that you play. We snicker and we sneer, for they do not revere this incessant gadgetry we incessantly deploy to incessantly extract and incessantly destroy. Don't you worship us, alright? Don't you worship us? Resist, comply. You die.
Aukai Ligairi, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. It's one of my, actually, this might be my favorite podcast, so I'm excited to be a guest on it.
You're punching me right in the feels right out of the gate. I love it so much. I'm so pumped that you're here. We have been talking about doing this, threatening to do this. I don't know. Has it been 2 years?
Been quite a while. Yeah. I remember, I had just started listening to your show. I think I found it the way a lot of people did by Chris. I think Chris had retweeted one of my tweets, and then you commented on it. I said, "Wait, there's a propaganda podcast," and so
Yeah.
I started. I listened to your first episode. I think it was like "Refusing to Be a Man" was the first one I listened to. I was just blown away. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And I'm going to try to say propaganda. No, we're not going to have that
That's
conversation
fine.
you have every time. But I just was blown away by the amount of work you put into it and how thorough it was, and I just loved it. And I've been listening to the show religiously, or but he's on the Hitchens episode. But I've been listening to it, but not in order of release. I've just been listening to it based on whatever song I felt like, wanting to really dig into at the moment. So it's been one of my favorite podcast experiences of this kind of pandemic era, corona apocalypse era. Yeah,
man, I'm so glad. Like, whenever you say that the first one that you really dove into was Refusing to Be a Man, I'm really glad that was your first one, because the amount of work that went into that episode, I mean, it had to have been 70 hours of human labor between Keith and me and Mary and Beeve and Zach and everybody who was on that episode. I mean, that was like a massive undertaking. So
hopefully this isn't another 70-hour job for you.
Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it is. Like, I love doing this, and I'm just so glad that to have this little like community of like propaganda obsessives out there who I've become friends with. It means like the world to me. And I am so glad that we never gave up on doing this. And the reason this took so long is because I have a tendency to procrastinate songs that I'm sort of afraid of. Do you know what I mean? Like Haile Selassie, Mataka Marisa Kun Rasakan. Like, there are certain songs that I procrastinate tremendously, and Comply Resist is completely a procrastination effort on my part.
I get it. I remember I tweeted you at the time and said, "Hey, when you get around to Comply Resist, please have an Indigenous scholar or someone on the show." And you said, "How about you?" And I was like, "Yeah, I don't know about that." But I appreciate you having me on.
Well, it's fabulous. And so I'm wondering if you can go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit just to the listeners out there, so they know a little bit about you before we kind of dive into this conversation that we're going to have.
Absolutely. I am not a scholar. I'm a filmmaker, documentary filmmaker, and I'm a Pacific Islander, and I've done most of my work with Pacific Island and Native American communities in North America, so-called North America. I do most of my work in Alaska currently. I'm working on a television series for National Geographic and BBC called First Alaskans, with an all-Indigenous cast. And it's crazy when there are 300 reality shows that take place in Alaska and not one of them has an Indigenous cast. And so,
wow,
it's great to be involved in the first, I guess. It's like both awesome and sad that I'm working on the first version of that. But so it's for National Geographic Channel. Nobody had ever really seen it because nobody has National Geographic Channel until the pandemic came around. Then they put all that stuff on Disney Plus. So now everybody's seen it. So it's great. So it's really easily accessible if you like the mouse. Like I know Chris does, actually. So
I mean, I have Disney Plus on my TV. You'll have to send me a list of titles.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I work on a larger series called Life Below Zero. Now I will say this, and this is interesting as we get into this conversation. Heavy trigger warning for people who are concerned about animal rights and animal cruelty, because these are Indigenous people living in traditional ways off the land, which includes a lot of hunting. And I think these are really interesting conversations as we get into this song specifically, because there's so many ways, that these kind of progressive communities that everyone is involved with, we all want to support each other, but some of our interests don't align. I think those are always interesting moments when, we're trying to be good allies to a certain group but not everything really lines up ideologically. And so I think that's actually a big theme of underlying a lot of this song, at least for me.
And that's really interesting too, because oftentimes like a group of people can have, 90% of their values align. And then what they do is they latch on to that 10% where they don't, and they harp on the 10% instead of the 90. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I mean, I remember when Chris was on that Q interview that he did.
Yeah.
He talked about maybe if I, lived in a non-industrial world, I would eat meat. But he's like, what I'm against is this kind of the industry around meat eating that creates all of this cruelty. And that's something I saw. I mean, I was a vegetarian for 20 years and vegan for 3 or so of those years. And I went out on these Native Alaskan hunts with people in these indigenous tribes, and it was a real shock. I'd never seen an animal die in front of me that close. It was kind of a horrifying experience. The first time I experienced it. At the same time, I felt connected to nature and the circle of life in a way I'd never had before. And when you're in Alaska, like I grew up in Hawaii, California, Utah, places with a lot of nature. And I thought I'd really been out in nature. It wasn't until I went to Alaska where I just realized how small we are, the vastness of our planet. And then also that Carl Sagan kind of pale blue dot, view of the universe, where it's just like, we're so tiny. And being out in these situations, I remember this hunter I was with had killed a moose. I'm filming it. And this is the other thing is I'm unarmed. And so I feel, there's a huge amount of vulnerability where I'm with a camera and there are grizzly bears and wolves and things around us at all times. I mean, even a wolf, even a moose can be very dangerous to a human, And I think when we think of hunting, we think about invading these animals' places. But for these Native Alaskans, this is their place as well. They've lived in this land for thousands of years amongst these animals. They're part of that cycle, and their hunting is sustainable, and it doesn't, it's healthy for the land in the way that they have traditionally harvested. They also don't believe in being a good hunter. There's no, I remember when Chris talked about his first hunting experience and the laughing and camaraderie and clapping, and there's nothing like that with the native hunters that I go out with. There's a deep respect for the land, deep respect for the animals. They don't believe that you can be a great hunter. They believe an animal will give itself to you if you're humble enough, if you're living in accordance enough with the land and your community, then you'll receive that as a gift. And there really aren't a lot of other ways for them to survive up there. That the vegetation isn't plentiful enough that they can have really sustainable gardens. Definitely not throughout the winters when you're talking about 50 below zero, 70 below zero temperatures. The stores that they have are the size of a small gas station, and Pop-Tarts. You know what I mean? There isn't nutrition available in a lot of other ways. And so, I go up and I'm working with people who, growing up in the 80s, like the Save the Whales and clubbing baby seals, like these are things that are the absolute worst thing you can imagine in terms of interacting with animals. And that's how these people live. I mean, they hunt whales sustainably. And I imagine that for a lot of this audience, that's a really triggering idea. And it was really hard to experience as someone who, had not eaten meat for 25 years of my life.
Wow.
But it was also, it reconnected me, I think, in a way with, just with the earth. And I felt what it felt like to be human in a more primal way than I'd ever felt before. I'm not like pro hunting, but what I am is I think it is definitely a much more responsible way to eat meat if you were going to than eating a chicken McNugget. It's you have to deal with the viscera, you have to deal with the responsibility of taking a life. And I think it's just much more honest, and it's been an incredibly eye-opening experience for me. It's also helped me connect with my own indigenous roots in the Pacific. It's a lot of fish and things like that are I've been out of the Pacific for half a generation and feel very Americanized, but my DNA has been in the Pacific for 5,000 years, and it's a big part of, it's intrinsically part of who I am. And you see a lot of health concerns for indigenous groups, and I think a lot of that is people who've gotten away from their traditional foods and eating these really terrible American diets. And I think there is really something to understanding how indigenous people live sustainably on their lands, for all of this time where they were really connected with nature on an island where you had to respect nature in order to survive, because for thousands of years there were not supplies coming in on a boat. Now maybe 80% of Hawaii's food comes in on a barge.
Yeah.
That was not the case for 5,000 years. So how did people live and thrive? They had to respect the environment, they had to respect the land, they had to respect the animals, and they had to learn how to live within that cycle. And I think that, to me, is the key to this huge climate crisis we're dealing with, is understanding how the indigenous peoples in whatever area you come from, it could be Ireland, but how did the people in those areas learn to live sustainably, before there was this huge industry around terrible,
Amazing,
unhealthy food.
What an amazing job you have, and such an interesting backstory too. I love that you mentioned that you realized your smallness in Alaska, but how growing up in Hawaii, because I lived in Hawaii for a bit, and living in Hawaii is what made me feel my smallest, because growing up in Missouri in the middle of the continental United States, I was surrounded by land for 1,000 miles plus in every direction. And so I was never at essentially in an isolated spot. And when I went to Hawaii, you can only drive around Oahu so many times
Right. Yeah.
before you feel tiny, because you're looking into thousands of miles of ocean in every single direction. And that is what made me feel my smallest, was living in your home place.
Well, it makes sense because Hawaii is the most isolated archipelago in the world, in terms of being the distance from other places. My family actually immigrated to Hawaii from Fiji. And so in the South Pacific, we're much closer. And but still, the Pacific Ocean is so vast, we don't know the depths of it still. It's really unexplored. And I think, but the way that we're taught to look at it, one of my the people who's really influenced my worldview is a Fijian Tongan scholar named Epeli Hau'ofa, and he talks about, he wrote a really seminal piece called Our Sea of Islands, which can be found in a collection called We Are the Ocean. But he basically talks about how we're connected by water, and we should be defined not by the smallness of our lands, but by the vastness of our oceans, which connect. And so I think for Pacific Islanders, I think the ocean is not a obstacle. It's our highway. It's our it's the thing that connects us to our family, our cousins on these other islands. And we're distinct tribes and distinct groups of people, but we're also one. I like to see the Pacific as one large group of people. I also think, just in terms of, I'm sorry, I'm getting really,
no, it's really
good far here, but in terms of political power, we're so small, and I think we get really focused on being Hawaiian or being Samoan. And even within those, if we go to Fiji, every island has 8 tribes, and each of those tribes has their own unique cultures and dialects. And so it's not to whitewash any of the uniqueness of any of those groups, any of those island nations, but I think we're so small. If we could consolidate as a group, we would have much more political power at the international table to have some say in our own self-determination, which is been a big problem in the Pacific. Again, relating back to this song, colonization devastated the Pacific for a long time, and we'll get into that, I'm sure. But it's interesting. For me, the ocean is definitely a connector. It's not a scary, isolating thing.
I've got maybe a simple question that so people listen to this podcast from all over the world. And for me, growing up, the term Pacific Islander was something that was found on the census. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Or when you fill out an application for a job or something and ask you to identify. So it's on job applications and it's on census stuff like that. But for just very basic understanding for those out there listening, can you give me an overview of who these populations of people are? You've already sort of mentioned some, but there might be more.
Yeah, for sure. We are small groups of people, and so we're not well represented. In fact, on the census, for many years, and we're just starting to move away from that. We were Asian slash Pacific Islander, and a lot of like the groups I work with are Asian American slash Pacific Islander communities, which is, it sounds like a colonization thing, but it was actually founded by Asian and Pacific Islanders themselves to kind of group together as people that could support each other as small minority groups. It's changing now a little bit. I mean, we're in a situation where because of colonization, because of settler colonialism, Native Hawaiians, for instance, are being priced out of their own homes. They cannot afford to live there anymore. And so you have there are more Pacific Islanders now living in the state of Nevada than there are in the islands of Hawaii, right? There are more Hawaiians in the continental United States than there are in the Pacific. There are more Pacific Islanders in general in the continental United States now in the Pacific as a whole. And I think that is also maybe even the case for Aotearoa, New Zealand, and Australia, that their Pacific Island populations are also large. And some of that is due to self-selection and intentional immigration. Some of that has to do with just being literally pushed out of your homelands and economically forced to go somewhere else to be able to earn the money that we now need. I think if you look back historically, like for instance, property ownership wasn't a thing in ancient Hawaii. So the systems that were set up to take care of the population, like we already talked about, in a sustainable way that cared for everyone's needs. And land ownership wasn't a thing, but these areas were passed down family to family. And so now you have a situation where, because there's not a paper trail of who owns these lands, Mark Zuckerberg can come in and buy up half an island, and like he literally, like Mark Zuckerberg's fence around his estate goes around family. There are family homes within his estate. It's just an insane situation that the illegitimate state of Hawaii perpetuates. And I don't know how much the average American knows about this either. And I'll get into this maybe a second. I'll answer your first question, but Hawaii is not a legitimate state, and we can talk about it. That's again like a terrible I'm blanking on the word I want to use, but it has stemmed from settler colonialism.
Yeah, land grab.
Yeah. So Pacific Islanders, this is the other thing, because we're so small, there's not a lot of research on this. There's not a lot of DNA. If you do 23andMe, you're not going to find a lot. If you're a Pacific Islander, it's going to say they're generally Asian or something like that, And so there are different cosmologies. And so, I can't speak for anyone but myself, but what I've learned from Kumo and people who know more than me about Hawaiian cosmologies, for instance, believe that Hawaiians originated in Hawaii. Whereas if you follow the DNA evidence that's available, which changes every year, you'll see origins coming from different places, from Taiwan to Madagascar. What I've done that makes the most sense to me is following the Austronesian language route. So what that would say is a group of people left Taiwan, and the indigenous Taiwanese people are different from mainland Chinese people racially. There are different groups of people. But a group of people who were voyagers, they built canoes and they traveled from Taiwan. They came down to the Philippines. When they got to the Philippines, there was already an existing population there, but they intermixed and they were there together for hundreds, maybe thousands of years. Then some of those groups of people left and populated what explorers, like French people later termed Micronesia, which would include like Palau and Guam and places like that. Others went further south and arrived in Papua and intermixed with people who were already there. Maybe those people may have come from Aboriginal Australians, and that same line, but now there's intermixing there. And so what you see then is the flow of Pacific people to the most known Polynesian islands, which would be Samoa, Tonga. Fiji is an interesting one because it's kind of on the cusp of both Polynesia and what the French termed Melanesia, the Black Islands, where you also have Vanuatu. Then you have Tahiti, Hawaii, Aotearoa, later called New Zealand, Easter Island, Rapa Nui, New Caledonia, all these places, they're the so-called French Polynesia. That's all of that are Pacific Islanders. And as far as I'm concerned, we're all family. Like whether it's Melanesia, Micronesia, Polynesia, we're all part of that same, we're children of the ocean. And I think we would be a lot stronger together if we could find ways to unite that didn't erase the beauty of our own individual cultures.
Amazing. That's such a nice overview too, because like now what I can do is I can kind of picture that a lot more in my mind. And I was completely ignorant of the history of Hawaii becoming a state until I went there on spring break during my senior year of college. And I was driving around the island of Oahu, and I was seeing these camps with these like signs everywhere about the, the sovereignty of, the original, like of the way that the island was taken over.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I was like mind blown. Like I was that much of a moron, just like I had no clue. I just wanted to go on vacation. And so then when I got back, I was like looking into it a little bit, and I found this book called Overthrow by a writer named Stephen Kinzer, who writes about 10 different takeovers of sovereign governments by the United States and its military. And Hawaii is chapter 1 of that book. So it was just like kind of going there and seeing it from my own eyes and being like, wow, something's not right here. And then just digging into it a little bit more. So I would encourage anybody out there to dig into this a lot more to understand exactly how Hawaii became a state and how the division and how the inequality and the economic reality of the situation continues to this very day.
It's the story of colonization. It's a story of, it's like the Pacific was settled first by missionaries. Christian missionaries came to the Pacific. Some of the first things they did are outlawed our languages, outlawed our religions, outlawed our cultural practices, including dance, and by doing so, are able to take control of those populations, and specifically with this situation in Hawaii, these people coming in as missionaries who were accepted by Hawaiians largely. Pacific Islanders are highly spiritual people, and so Christianity actually did very well in the Pacific. But what you have a situation here where a generation later, the children of those missionaries, they're still there, and they now consider themselves local. And they are now but they're essentially, for all purposes, they're still Americans. They have monetary backing of an American, and they start all these businesses. Sugar was the big business at that time, and they realize that they've got a huge financial interest in controlling this area. Within 50 years of Captain Cook arriving in Hawaii, like 80% of the Hawaiian population was dead from disease. So already you have a massive destruction of that native people. But then when you have the sugar plantations coming in to bolster the population, you have Chinese, Japanese, Portuguese, all of these workers from around the world coming in to work in these plantations. So now like a large percentage of your native Hawaiian population is mixed ethnicity, which is fine, except for the United States government requires some measure of blood quantum in order to own land as a native. And so it's, they disenfranchise, these Hawaiians of their land as well. But all of this is rolled up into an illegal overthrow of the Hawaiian kingdom with support from U.S. Marines, and resulting in this illegal annexation of Hawaii, and then later an illegal statehood. And by all international law, this is all totally illegal. The kingdom legally still exists, the Hawaiian kingdom. And so this is just something outrageous that most Americans have no idea about. Bill Clinton first apologized for this back during his presidency, and told this story to the world without giving any lands back, right? So there was not, we'll apologize for this, but we're not saying we're giving it back. We're keeping it because it's now a very strategic military installation, right? And so, militarization is also a big part of the Hawaiian story. And, the U.S. military and tourism drive a good portion of Hawaii's economy, but it's not necessary In fact, it's destructive to the land and to the native peoples who are being driven from their homes due to most of the business, most of the homes, all of the stuff is owned by guys from California, or, people from China. They're not. It's not owned by Hawaiians. And it's a really devastating situation there with mass homelessness.
Where did your family live when you were in Hawaii?
Oahu also. So my father did something that was a big deal as well in the 70s. Is the Mormon Church developed these universities in the Pacific, and that allowed Pacific Islanders to attend those universities and then get to the United States. And so that's how my father went to Hawaii on a dance scholarship. He did traditional Fijian dance. That's where he met my mom, and that was kind of the birth of of me, I guess.
Wow.
Was that thing. So, he joined this church in order to get to America. And for that generation, and I see this with the Native Alaskan groups I work with as well, there was this generation, my parents' generation, which in Alaska, in the groups I've worked with, they call the Lost Generation. This is the generation that I think for a lot of immigrants, they wanted to come to America for a better life. I think you talk to the Native Alaskans, they needed to leave the village for a better life. The problem is, like in the Alaskan village, there's no infrastructure. So if you leave the village to go get a college education, you can do that, but then you're not going to be able to come back and get a job with that college education in the village. So you're choosing then between living in mainstream white America or returning to your family and having no money, no infrastructure. And so it creates these really terrible situations for a lot of Native people. And in the case of both the Native Alaskans I've worked with and the Pacific Islanders that I know personally and that I am one of, a huge amount of culture loss. So my generation didn't get culture handed down to us. And so a lot of us are having to find that for ourselves,
Man, and like what was so nuts is I have these vivid memories of going to Hawaii for the first time in 2006, I think was the first time. And I had a rental car and I'm driving around the island and I'm on Kamehameha Highway. And all of a sudden I see Brigham Young University right there on the north shore of the island. Yep. And it's right next to the Polynesian Cultural Center, which is one of the biggest tourist attractions on the entire island. So you have this Mormon university directly next to the Polynesian Cultural Center on like arguably one of the most beautiful coastlines imaginable on that North Shore.
So, so my dad was a Fijian dancer at the Polynesian Cultural Center. And that whole thing is interesting as well. There's a lot of mixed feelings about that place because there are a lot of people who say, well, it's a human zoo. There's a lot of other people who say it's nice that the number one tourist attraction is a place where people can actually experience the cultures of the Pacific, because I know there's a lot of people, I know a lot of people personally who go to Hawaii and never meet a Hawaiian, never eat Hawaiian food. They just go straight from the resort or their condo to the beach and back again, and so personally, I like that exists. I like that a lot of the people who work in those villages are from the villages themselves. They're from, and it's giving them a chance to get a Western education. I don't know. Again, there's a debate on whether that's a good thing or not, but it's a good opportunity for a lot of people in these villages in Samoa or Tonga to come and be able to get an education, share their culture. I personally am a favorite. I know a lot of people who are against it as well. So it's a tricky situation. But the Mormon Church was one of the first colonizers of the Pacific. They were very successful. I believe that the Tongan royalty are now Mormon as well. So they were very successful in their colonization efforts. And in fact, the push for Hawaiian statehood had a lot to do with Wall Street protecting the Mormon Church's sugar interests. The Mormon Church had a lot of sugar interests in Hawaii. So that is it's interesting, because I was raised in that white American culture as a Pacific Islander, and it took a lot for me to understand. My father joined a church where he wasn't considered a full human. You know what I mean? And that's so mind-boggling to think about now, like how he could join an organization that didn't consider him a man, a full man.
Wow.
But I understand that he did that for the opportunity that he saw as being something he could come to America and have a better life. He was sold that idea, so
incredible.
Yeah.
Man, well, okay, so this is like this amazing, in-depth, thorough backstory. And now I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about music. How did
Yeah.
you get into like punk and propaganda? Like tell me a little bit about how that weaves into your life story.
I was just raised on pop music, Michael Jackson on the radio, and whatever 70s rock music my mom had kicking around from her college music collection. When I got to junior high, I started discovering punk, and it was early Seattle stuff, which led to, and it was right around the time Nirvana blew up too. So I started listening to that, and it was just so depressing. I was like, I'm so bummed out about this music. Like, this music's making me so sad as a seventh grader, you know. And it
Yeah.
was hearing No Effects Ribbed and stuff that I was like, this is funny. These guys don't take themselves so seriously. I can like, I want to listen to some music that's not so serious. Ironically, the punk bands that I ultimately latched onto and have been my lifelong loves are the bands who were very serious, like Propaganda. But
Yeah.
at the time, the thing that got me into it was just lighter fare, you know, than that kind of heavy Seattle, depressing Seattle stuff I'd been listening to previous to that. So I was living in Utah at the time. I was the thing that Propaganda probably hated. I was the snowboarder, skateboarder kid that, I found there was a uh Thrasher skateboarding video called The Truth Hurts, and it had a Bad Religion song, American Jesus from Recipe for Hate, and it had No Effects Sold Out on it. And I went to the local CD store, and I thought I was buying Bad Religion, but I bought No Effects accidentally, and listened to White Trash, Two Hubes and a Bean. I was like, this is hilarious. My friend had Ribbed, and so I listened to that. I thought that was hilarious. And then I eventually got Bad Religion, Recipe for Hate, and then Backtrack to Suffer. And I was just hooked, you know, and I really liked what I was listening to. Pennywise was one of the first bands I discovered through
Yeah.
a article in Trans World Snowboarding magazine, you know. So I think I understand why Propaganda would be turned off by the commercialization of punk music through those genres, but for me, it was a lifeline in a place where I didn't feel like I had uh, the values and things that I had were not represented by the general population. Like, to me, it was a form of resistance that was really meaningful,
Mhm.
even in those bands that were so silly. And for me, finding Propaganda, I just saw them as one of the leaders of the punk movement in the era that I was growing up. So for me, like, you know, Propaganda maybe saw punk as like this mindless SoCal thing. For me, punk was Propaganda. So like, punk was great. Punk taught me all the values that I believed in, you know, and for me, so I had seen No Effects before Punk and Drublic came out. I had seen Green Day before Dookie, but it
Wow.
was like right at that cusp. It was like right
Yeah.
when all that stuff was coming out, and I didn't want to abandon Green Day because they were popular all of a sudden. I decided, like, I loved Lookout Records, Screeching Weasel, you know, all those Pansy Division, like the Queers, like all those bands that were in that Lookout Records, Op Ivy, obviously, world. And I didn't want to abandon that because they got popular all of a sudden. I think there were bands that changed their sound a lot and got kind of lame, like Offspring, in my opinion. But like, I felt like Green Day at that era, they were still just doing their thing. And so I wanted to still support them. So I had a Dookie shirt and I wore it to school. And there was part of me that was kind of embarrassed, but it was also kind of like, F you, they're still cool. I'm going to wear this Dookie shirt to high school.
Yeah.
And I was sitting in this classroom, and there was a kid visiting from California who already I have a chip on my shoulder. Like, the California kids would come to Utah and think they were so cool. And I was like, oh, screw you guys. He says, hey, you like Green Day? And I just kind of roll my eyes and I was like, no, already. You know, he's like, if you like Green Day, I've got a couple other bands I want to recommend to you. I was like, okay. Like, I was just like, I don't want to hear whatever bands you think I'm going to like because I like Green Day. But the two bands he recommended to me were Blink 182, who was just Blink at the time,
Yeah.
and Propaganda. And so he wrote them down. He handed me the thing, and I went to the record store a couple days later, and I thought, I'll check those bands out. So I pulled up Blink, Cheshire Cat, and Propaganda, How to Clean Everything, and I was like, this is so good. Like, I couldn't
Yeah.
believe what I was hearing at that, at that moment. And that, yeah, that kind of just brought me into it. I remember seeing Good Riddance, Forgotten Country, and Lagwagon, I think Trashed. And I just remember, seeing, it's kind of one of those things in that era, there was no internet. So it's like, I'm like, Fat Records, where have I seen that before? Oh wait, that's on the back of White Trash, Two Hebes and a Bean. Oh wait, are there other bands on Fat Records? And then I'm like going through all the liner notes, and and you're like reading the thank yous and finding more bands through that. And for me, I really appreciated that melodic punk sound. I thought those bands were good, Strung Out and Lagwagon. I still think, for my money, Joey Cape is my second favorite lyricist after Chris Hanna. Like I think he's very earnest in the things he says, and I think he's a poet, and I love that stuff, even though the music maybe isn't as isn't progressing as much and isn't as interesting as what Propaganda's done over the years. I still think Lagwagon is one of the best bands ever. So I like that stuff a lot.
Dude, I tell you what, the record that Joey Cape wrote about Derek Plord, Resolve, that came out in like 2005, I think that album is so criminally overlooked for how deeply emotional and incredible those words are. So yeah. I have absolutely no issue with what you're saying right now at all, and I'm in complete agreement.
So it was, for me, I was just getting into all those bands, and I was into like the entire breadth of punk that was out at that era, not just that SoCal sound, but like everything. I was just exploring and digging back into the roots and getting into it. It was Less Talk More Rock changed my life completely. Like reading those liner notes, reading those essays, thinking about things I'd never thought about. Like that was the moment where I was like, that changed me, like as a person in a deep way that has resonated for the rest of my life. Like that, for Less Talk More Rock, for me, was life changing. And like in a way I can't even really truly wrap my own head around,
I'm like 2.5 years into trying to wrap my own head around it myself at this point.
Right.
Do you have any stories about seeing Propaganda live? Have you been able to see them live at all throughout their different eras?
Yeah, I think I'm not as specific as you. I haven't looked up like the actual dates, but I'm really curious when it was. Because I know John was still in the band.
Nice.
And I would have said it was the Less Talk More Rock tour, but I don't know the timing of that. As I've listened to your podcast, I've learned that Todd was on that tour. So I'm actually confused about exactly when that was, but I know I bought the I'd Rather Be Flag Burning t-shirt with the Anarchy A on the back from the Less Talk More Rock art. I had that t-shirt all through high school. Got me in a lot of trouble wearing that to Mormon high school classes, with the gay positive and all that stuff. People are always like questioning me about it. Teachers make me take it off, all kinds of crazy stuff. But yeah, I went and saw them at a place called the Bar and Grill in Salt Lake City. And my biggest memory was at that time period, I didn't have a lot of money. And me and my friends would go to the punk shows before they'd start and would hang out and try to meet the band when the band would arrive, and would say, hey, can we help you load in and you can put us on the guest list? That was our move. And the reason for doing that was if we didn't have to pay for the ticket, we could then spend that money to buy a CD or a t-shirt. And so that was our goal. So the band was still getting our money, but just not, that was our only way to be able to get like the CD or the t-shirt. So we did that a lot. We did that with Blink, for instance. The Vandals. There was a tour that was the Vandals, Strung Out, and Blink. We did that at that show. We did that with Joy Killer.
Nice.
With Jack Grisham. And I was sitting outside the Bar and Grill, and Propaganda rolls up in their van. And I was just kind of sitting there, and Chris gets out and he goes, hey, do we go around the back to unload, or where do we load our gear in? And I said, I'm just a kid, I'm just a kid. I don't know. And Chris stopped and looked me in the eyes. He's like, I'm just a kid too. And I like, that was one of those, again, seminal moments that for me, like, was transformative. Like,
wow.
The way, when he said that to me, I was just like, I love this. I love this guy. I love his attitude. And we ended up loading in with Propaganda. It was mostly working with Jord, like getting gear in, but they were super welcoming to us. Like Salt Lake at the time did not have like good vegetarian options. And so like the only food that the club could provide was a big hummus and veggie plate, but they invited us. So we sat and ate hummus with John and talked, and we were huge fans, me and my friend, and so we just got to hang out with them for a couple hours during the load in process. And they said, hey, go ahead and go back and grab a free book if you want. You can get a free book or a free t-shirt, whichever you want. And so we went back, I bought a t-shirt and got a free book from the AK press table. And not only was the album a big moment, but meeting them was a huge moment, and just like kindness and being grounded and just regular guys. And I just really appreciated that. But yeah, and then they rocked too. That was also one of the first shows where I remember not moshing and just like, they were so good, wanting to just stand there and listen to the music. Like that was one of the first times where I just stood in the back and like watched what the band was doing. I mean, like, wow, you guys are really good. I loved watching Jord, especially. And then I saw them again with Todd for the Today's Empires tour. Also in Salt Lake City. And then because I am just not musically mature, I could not follow them on the next part of their journey, honestly. Like I didn't get it, and I didn't understand Potemkin City Limits. I think there was that divide in where like melodic punk was no longer cool, and bands, I followed Weaker Than's direction. I went that way with my musical appreciation. I followed the acoustic, indie, like followed Hot Water Music into their like that direction.
Yeah.
In that era. And so I was in that kind of college rocky world for many years. I still loved punk, but it wasn't until many years later that I like rediscovered my love of it, and I got to where I am now, where all of that stuff is back in my life as strongly as it ever was, but I still have the eclectic taste that I developed over my 20s and stuff. So it took me a while, but Victory Lap completely won me over, and then that allowed me to go back and appreciate the other albums more than I had on first blush. It's kind of like every time a new album would come out, I'd listen to it and I'd try to find like the one song that kind of reminded me of Less Talk or Today's Empire.
Yeah.
And then I'd be like, I like that one, but I don't get the rest of this. I just wasn't a metal guy. I believed, and I was in punk bands also growing up, and I really believed, like I heard Fat Mike say in an interview, oh, you don't need to know how to play an instrument to play punk. And so I was like, okay, cool, because I don't want to learn how to play an instrument. I was in punk bands and never learned how to play an instrument, I played the bass, but not well. And so I that's basically as far as my musical maturity went. And so it took me a long time through back ways of discovering jazz and classical music to be able to like, oh, I get metal now. Oh, metal's pretty cool actually. And I'm kind of like expanding my musical horizons now for the first time.
I'm curious about your thoughts on Victory Lap too. So you mentioned that Victory Lap won you over, and I'm wondering if you relate to my theory that they did, the really melodic years, and then they did some really super heavy years, and that Victory Lap is a perfect combination of both of those eras that could not be possible if records like Failed States and stuff like that didn't exist. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So for me, Let's Talk More Rock is maybe the best punk album of the 90s. But now with my deeper Propaganda appreciation, I don't even know if I'd say it's my favorite Propaganda album. It was just so life-changing. It was such a monumental moment in my life that and I also think it's such a good conversion tool, not only for punk at the time, but also for all these ideologies, because the lyrics were so different than they are now. Now there are these beautiful stories. The time it was just like, do this, don't do that. And like, It was really instructive, and it was actually, for that age I was at, really necessary for someone to speak to me so directly.
Yeah.
I don't know if I had found supporting cast if I would have understood all the messages underlying it at that age. It really was necessary for me to hear Less Talk More Rock. But musically, I just like that tone, and I was listening to Chris's podcast recently on his Patreon, and he was talking about the influences that kind of led him there. And like, I would love to hear him revisit some of those influences and see what he would do now with some of that stuff, because I just love where he went. But yeah, supporting cast is an example of like, that's close to my favorite album now. And I probably couldn't even have listened to it 5 years ago. So I've matured a lot in my and what Victor Lap did is it allowed me to rediscover those other albums, because I could hear the Propaganda that I loved in Victory Lap.
Yeah.
And then that allowed me to understand what they were doing previous to that better, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Like to me, there's really nothing like the song Victory Lap or Cop Just Out of Frame or Call Before You Dig. Like there's nothing like those songs on Failed States at all. And if you think
Right.
about supporting cast, Humane Meat is kind of like it. The Bangers Embrace is kind of like it. But like Victory Lap really revisits and hones what Less Talk More Rock was flirting with sound wise. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's hard for me to pick a favorite album, but right now, yeah, I'm so in love with Victory Lap right now. I love everything about it. It's such a good album. I hope they change every time, so I'm so curious what the new album's gonna sound like. But I really love Victory Lap so much.
Well, I
Failed
know they're
States is the
working
one I
on it.
haven't. Failed States is the only one that I haven't been able to fully. But your podcast has actually been huge in this department. It's made me consider all these songs that I hadn't listened to, including How to Clean Everything, songs that I kind of screw that era. It's
Dude,
helped me
yes.
reappreciate How to Clean Everything as well, which I pretty much abandoned.
I tell you what, man, a few of my favorite episodes that we've ever done have been on Pigs Will Pay and Leg Hold Trap, songs that were recorded for How to Clean Everything but didn't make the final record. Those are
Yeah.
two of my favorite episodes we've ever done because I got to talk to Conrad Sichler for Leg Hold Trap, who sang for John K. Sampson's high school band.
I remember that.
And then the Pigs Will Pay episode, that was one of the most deeply moving series of like research for the episode that I've ever done for the entire podcast is like those two songs. So like those episodes that did this had the same exact effect for me, even though I was the one making them.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's what a gift. And also I can imagine you're burned out on it by now, but you're doing great. I really applaud you what you're doing. I think you're in the way that Chris seems to struggle with whether or not he is having an impact. I think it's very clear to me that I know the impact he's had on me, and I really believe you're also having a major impact on people because you're helping them discover intricacies of like this really important band as well. Like I really applaud you for what you've done with this podcast.
Man, thank you so much. It's honestly the creative thrill of my life. Like
That's
seriously,
awesome.
I don't mean that I mean that as hyperbolically as it sounds. It is the creative thrill of literally my entire life is this show. So I want to talk about Comply Resist now.
Yeah.
You chose, as you mentioned earlier, you picked this song way back years ago when we started the show. And we've kept in touch here and there. And we're always like, yeah, haven't forgotten. But then you threw me a curveball. I thought you were just going to be like on the episode. And then a few months back, you were like, I really want to make a cover of this song. And I'm like, man, hell yeah, do it. Because the covers have become seriously some of my favorite things about this show. There must be 50 of them in the show by now. It's insane. And so tell me why you decided to embark upon this extremely challenging idea. So people have already heard the cover way back in the beginning of the episode. Tell me, why you decided to pursue this instead of just like being a guest on the episode itself.
Well, it was really a selfish reason. I had this idea for a band I wanted to do for many years, and it was just I couldn't actually visualize it. Like I said, I'm not like a really trained musician in any way, so I knew what I wanted to do was take Polynesian sounds and put them in a punk context. And the song is so perfect for the themes that I would talk about in a band of my own. These themes of colonization and things like that are really important to me. It just seemed like a great opportunity to try it out and see if I can make it sound how I wanted it to sound. It's still not exactly like what I would write, obviously, because Propaganda are geniuses, and also I have just different influences and stuff, but it's really close to what I was trying to pull off, and it was just a good exercise. I've been so ignorant in my life throughout the years, but there was a artist who's a rapper named Poetic who won Pacific Artist of the Year a few years back, and I was listening to one of his songs on YouTube, and I commented like, kind of sucks that you're trying to sound like a South California rapper from the 90s. Like, we have our own sounds, we have our own voices, like why not do that? I just wrote a stupid snarky internet comment, and I deleted it. I felt bad about it instantly. I'm like, why am I doing this to another artist? But the way YouTube works is it leaves those comments up in his inbox even though I've deleted it. So he still saw it, and then he doxed me,
Mm.
and it was actually a really educational experience for me because all of his fans came and told me what they thought about my dumb comment, and it was really eye opening. It was, not only did I not know that Pacific Islanders were in the spaces where hip hop and rap were being created in Southern California for the very first time. Not only did I not know that reggae was happening in the Pacific at the exact same time it was happening in Jamaica, for instance. I thought of those as black sounds, which is not a problem other than I grew up around white kids who were misappropriating those black sounds all the time. So
Mhm.
when I, growing up in the era I grew up, when I think of Bob Marley or I think of hip hop, I think of white kids in dorm rooms. I don't think of black culture. Do you know what I mean? And so I just thought,
Right.
I don't want to see my own people do that. I don't want to see us appropriate black music. Let's do our own thing. Let's use our own sounds. We've got this great musical history. Why can't we do our own thing? And as Poetic very cleverly said to me, like the obvious response is, why don't you do your own thing? I was like, good
Mm.
idea. I'll do my own thing. And, it took just a little bit deeper thinking to realize, well, okay, also I'm appropriating white music, and also that white music also is black music. And it's just funny. Like it was a stupid argument to begin with. But what I didn't learn was the inventor of the steel, lap steel slide guitar, it was a Hawaiian man. The inventor of the guitar amplifier were some Hawaiian kids in the car shop class.
Huh.
The ukulele is I believe it's a Portuguese instrument, but those, that was important in Pacific culture, still is. The slack key guitar also, I think, came from Mexico or Portugal, but is important Hawaiian instrument. And so I just wanted to, but then the drums are really Polynesian, Tongan and Tahitian drums. And I just want to take all of these elements that were kind of part of Pacific culture and apply those to the kind of music I like. Really for protest music, because
Yeah.
I should have said this earlier, like protest music in the islands is all reggae or hip hop. And so I just thought we need protest songs that are just a different genre, just so it exists. Like I don't need to be famous or tour or anything. I just want it to exist in the world that there is Pacific protest music in another style, because I wasn't into those styles. So that's kind of where this came from. And it was sludge in my brain as I would try to describe it to friends who I wanted to start these bands with. They'd be like, I don't know if that's going to work. And so I needed to actualize it. And so that's what this was, an opportunity for me to try it out, basically.
Amazing. Well, I love the cover. Love it. I've listened to it 20 times easily
Awesome.
since you sent it to me. And I want to hear the story of how this thing came together. I have so many questions about the creation of this recording. Like I want to know studio details. I want to know who was involved. I want to know what instruments appear on the song. Like I want to know what was the hardest thing. What was the funnest thing? Like I have so many questions about the story. Just tell me the story of recording this song.
Well, again, the idea was, can we do this kind of song with Pacific instruments? And then, and the first thing I realized was surf rock is the way to get into this, because surf rock is another genre that's already utilizing the Hawaiian steel guitar, and it's also utilizing Pacific Islander drums.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, that's how we get into this. That's like the way to, and it's fast music. Anyone who's heard the Pulp Fiction soundtrack is kind of familiar with the sound of it a little bit.
Dick Dale,
exactly. And the Ventures, like all this stuff, the Lively Ones. Can we use that energy for this protest music? Was really just the basic idea. And so this would absolutely not have been possible without Joel Pack at Rigby Road Studios. Like Joel is a musical genius. I met him when he was like 13 years old. He was the original bassist for a group called Strange Itch, which later turned into The Used in my local scene.
Wow, cool.
So Joel met Jeff, who's the current bass player for The Used, at the mall, and Jeff had dreads, and he said, "Hey man, can you sing? You look cool." And so he recruited Jeff as the singer of that band. And then Joel eventually quit that band, and Jeff became the bass player of The Used. But Joel was in that early incarnation of that group, and he also had a major record label deal with Maverick Records, and was totally screwed when that record label closed just as his album was coming out. Warner Brothers said, we're going to keep Alanis Morissette in the Deftones, and everybody else we're dropping. And his album was like a few days, I think, from coming out when that happened. So,
Oh my God.
what he's done is he's taken his musical he still does that band Broke City, and they're great. He also does some solo work that's great, but he's taken a lot of that energy and he put it into Rigby Road Studios, and where he records and produces a lot of amazing bands. And he was just my friend who I knew, who was a musical genius, and I just said, if anybody can help me figure out the sludge in my brain, it's Joel. And he basically single-handedly helped me one by one, like work through each of these instruments, work through each of these parts. He came up with some really cool ideas. Like there's a moment where Chris is like, and he turned that into and he heard that Dick Dale guitar slide in that kind of thrashy stuff Chris was doing, and connected those two ideas, which to me makes the song. Like I was like, that was brilliant, you know. There's another breakdown in the song where it's like, the silly names you give your kids. In my mind, that was going to be the Wipeout. If you've ever heard the song Wipeout,
Yeah,
just how it's like just like that ongoing drum thing. I'm like, I just want that to just only be drums, like pull out all the guitar. And it was Joel's idea to be like, why don't we use like actual jungle sounds here? Like you're talking about the jungle music that you play. Why don't you put in some Polynesian vocals into this part? And so we ended up using a ha'a, which is the Hawaiian version of the haka, which people would probably be more familiar with from New Zealand.
yeah.
So he had some really great ideas that made the thing, and his instrumentation, his genius as a musician helped nail a bunch of these parts that I could not have figured out on my own, just simply because of I just couldn't. It's kind of like I just had all these ideas in my head that I couldn't figure out what they would sound like, and he helped me get those all down. And yeah, so we just went through the song piece by piece. I'm like, this should be this instrument, this should be that instrument, and it's all the ones I mentioned. You know, it's a Hawaiian steel guitar, which is cool because Joel also grew up in Utah, and his grandmother was a colonial settler in Hawaii. She was a mathematics teacher at Brigham Young University, and she bought this Hawaiian steel guitar there in 1979 that he now owns. And so I think he saw this as his payback, like his penance for his grandmother's actions was to like perform that Hawaiian steel guitar on this song. So I thought that was beautiful, a nice gesture of his. And so that appears on the song. There's ukulele, there's Tahitian and Tongan drums. There are guitar sounds like a Telecaster that's, you know, very much in the Dick Dale style. And then something wasn't quite working because the Propaganda song is so dark. It just wasn't quite fitting the tone I was going for. So we ended up changing the tuning, like it's in drop C. We changed it so that the timing was a difficult thing. Was getting the tempo, changing it to a single tempo was really difficult, but that's one of the things we did to make it work better for the style. And then another of Joel's idea was, let's throw in that surf rock drum kit in a couple spots. I didn't want to do that because I wanted to really stick with the Polynesian drums. But he's like, this will sell the surf rock sound you're going for. Because that's what I wanted it to sound like, almost like at first people think like, oh, is this a surf rock song I've never heard? Like that's kind of what I was going for in my mind. And it was getting into that same tempo and then throwing in that 60s drum kit, like he called it the that thing you do drum kit, into a couple parts. I think it really worked. And one of the things he said was the Venn diagram of where George drums and Polynesian drums meet is very tiny. There's not a lot of similarities there, but what is there is triplets. And so that's really where we chased those moments and tried to feel like it was like that Propaganda stuff was in those, using a lot of those triplets in the same place as Jordan was using triplets. So that was the big thing. And then then around that, utilizing those big traditional Polynesian drum sounds. What else? I think the vocals are a little bit more wet than I would prefer. And I know Chris also doesn't love like overly produced vocals. And I was a little bit annoyed at first because I was like, oh, my vocals are pretty raw and this sounds like a little juicy. And he's like, yeah, but it's got to sound kind of dreamy and hypnotic because that's the vibe of the surf guitar. And the vocals can't, like, they have to kind of like be a little bit dreamy too. So we went with a little bit more wet vocals than I normally would prefer. But it was, again, this was experimentation because this is basically what I'm doing is I'm starting a Polynesian protest band, and I wanted
Yeah,
this was the proof of concept for that for me. So
incredible. Did you use Chris's Patreon playthrough video for this guitar riff? Because that guitar riff that he does, where he's like doing a little marching sound with his pointer finger and middle finger,
yeah,
is like that main riff. Like watching him do the playthrough video, I'm like, this is insane the way he plays this. And I'm wondering
yeah.
if you had any thoughts on like the guitar performance and how you went through that.
No, that again was Joel, and he just is a genius, and he just nailed it. I had
Unbelievable.
no issue with it, which is crazy because we all know Chris is a genius. So, yeah, Joel's just insane. He's super skilled, and with the bass, it pretty much follows the bass, but it has more of like a 808 bass, like subtle dance hall tone. It's a little bit different, but we pretty much followed that. There are some parts where the Telecaster guitar is playing the bass line, I think, but and then I mean, I don't know. It's all different and it's all the same. We really tried to hone as close to it as possible. But if there was ever a conflict, it was like go towards surf rock. Like that was the idea. If there
Amazing.
anytime it didn't work, it was like let's go in the surf rock direction. So.
That is really, really awesome. How many sessions in the studio are we looking at here? Because this is amazingly well done.
Oh, thanks. It wasn't as much as it sounds like. Like it was like 2 or 3 times. It was maybe like 2 times actually recording. Plus, I did vocals separately in a hotel room and then on GarageBand and then sent them into the studio. But a lot of the time was just figuring it out. So there's probably an additional 2 or 3 days in the studio just trying to like, how do we do this? You know what I mean? And I was very lucky to have Joel as a friend and have his own studio space where we could play around and he could really try stuff out and run it by me, and we could nail that concept.
What an incredibly joyful experience to be able to do this with your friend too. You know what I mean?
It was great. It was really fun. Yeah,
That is
absolutely.
incredible. I do want to chat about the lyrics for a while, if that's okay.
I would love to.
I am just like so much of the what is this song about has already been discussed, right?
Mhm.
You've gone over so many stories that really resonate with the heart and soul and the message of this song, in my view, just based on like the personal life stories and the stuff that you've already talked about. So I'm wondering if you can just start off by broadly to me, like what this song like means to you, what you learn from it, what it asks you to think about. Just kind of start there.
So for me, this is one of the only propaganda songs that I didn't learn anything, if that makes sense. Like for me,
Yeah.
this was my life. Like and what this taught me was more about what I've learned from propaganda more broadly, which is how to be a good ally.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I knew this kind of confirmed everything I'd wondered all these years. Like, am I doing this right? Like, I care about all these issues, but they're not really my issues. Like I care about gay rights, I care about trans rights, I care about animal rights, I care about all these things. But sometimes I feel like I'm outside of them. Like they're not really my place. It's not my lane. I just want to be supportive. I want to like do the right thing, like, and
Yeah.
so, and it can be overwhelming to like tackle all of the world's problems. It can be very heavy. It can make you feel very hopeless. It's a lot to tackle. And so I don't think we should necessarily. I think we should be supportive in the places we can, but really focus on our communities and do the things that we can do. That's kind of been the way I've been able to survive burnout, is just really trying to make my little piece of the world as good as I can make it. But what this taught me was this idea of what it means to be a good ally. Propaganda teaches us how to be good allies, is my theory. And how the way this actualized it for me was because this song is good allyship for I think for, and again, I'm looking at this from a Pacific Island perspective. This is obviously written, I'm sure, much more in mind with Indigenous Canadian perspective, and also we know about, it refers to the Black Lives Matter movement as well. So it's not, but I am looking at it through my lens, and from my lens, this song really gets what I go through every day. Like I in the cover version, I didn't include the Hitchens lines, and I love them in the propaganda version, but they were just unnecessary in the version I was doing. And part of that was because this is how I'm spoken to every day. Like the kind of stuff Hitchens was saying is something that is said to me at least once a year throughout my entire life. You know what I mean? Like everything the song says, I encounter. I would say when I was in my teens, I probably encountered on a daily basis, like in high school. Now it's more like on a yearly basis. But this is the kind of things that people in my position are confronted with constantly. You know, and so and you know, I also think about what's the I can't believe I'm blanking on the song name right now, but the Swastikas and Clan Robes song.
Oh yeah, Kill Bill Harkus, yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the original version.
Only Good Fascist is a Very Dead Fascist.
Yeah, exactly. I remember, you know, I don't musically, that was not a song that I particularly enjoyed, like sonically, but I remember being in high school and in the car with all my white friends and them singing along to that song and me feeling safe because they were. Like, I remember that feeling of like, these guys don't like racism. And this is like the first time I'm like seeing that actualized. I don't know if that makes any sense, but like having them say, you can wear my nuts on your Nazi chins, and like having a bunch of white guys shouting that around me made me feel safe around them, you know?
Yeah.
And I kind of feel safe when I hear this song too. Like somebody gets it, somebody gets what I'm going through. And I guess the extrapolation from that I'm trying to make the connection of very poorly is that this increases my faith in the way I've been taught by Chris Hanna throughout my life to interact with other communities in need, because he did this one so perfectly. Like he spoke to my needs so perfectly in this song. It gives me more faith that I can be a good ally to women or, you know, to other at-risk groups in the ways that like I've been kind of, I've learned. Literally, I mean, it's sad, and I've done my own work, obviously, my own research. I've tried to become educated in my own way, in my own reading, but really Chris taught me everything that is the foundation for my worldview. You know what I mean? And
Totally.
and so you worry putting your mind into anybody's hands, you know, and am I doing this right? Am I being like during the Black Lives Matter movement, that was an important thing. Like, am I being a good ally? Like, I don't know if I'm doing this right. I think for brown people, there's this additional thing. It's like, hey, we're all struggling too. And there I saw a lot of people during that era in the communities I work in kind of resisting it a little bit. Like, why are we focused on Black folks when we're also struggling really bad? You know, there was some resistance to that. And, you know, and the response to that was, yeah, but this is the group that's needed the most, kind of. And I think in the Pacific, we see similar stuff. Like there's all of the Pacific is struggling, but a lot of the discourse is Hawaii centric, and how are Hawaiians being affected? And even you see a lot of racism from Hawaiians to other settler groups from the Pacific, you know, from Micronesia particularly. But you know, there's a lot of focus on the Hawaiian experience over other Pacific Islanders, at least in the United States. And I think that has to do with the unfortunate relationship between Hawaii and the United States. But it's all very Hawaii centric, and so you think, like, why are they the center of the universe? Like, we all have our issues that are going on. And a Hawaiian friend of mine, this artist Kehau Noyau, she said to me, you know, if the body is Polynesia, like we have this infected arm that's Hawaii, and it needs care first, or we're going to lose it. You know, that related back to this Black Lives Matter idea that I had as well, and this relates back to the larger overall idea of how do we support these groups we're not necessarily part of, and make sure that we're good allies and advocates. And I'm sorry if that was a crazy tangent, but that's kind of what I learned from this song. It was
nice.
The advocacy I learned from Propaganda was probably good. It was probably a good way to be oriented toward the rest of the world. And like I trust the allyship I learned through this band due to how well they pulled this one off for me.
That's such an interesting point that you see this as good allyship. Like I really have never even thought about it like that. So I'm really glad that you kind of nailed on that point really hard for me. Cause I was like, oh, interesting. Okay, great. Cause what art is good allyship is a really good question for anybody to consider. You know what I mean? That's got me thinking a lot. Did you ever have any interest in the work of Christopher Hitchens at all? Because as a white guy, in the Midwest who was growing up like in a certain religious community, finding a book like God Is Not Great was like, I remember it very distinctively as being a fairly important moment in my own like thoughts and thinking and intellectual journey with regards to thinking about religion. So when this song came out, this was a piece from Hitchens that I had never really experienced before. And I was like, whoa, this is really unexpected for me, for somebody that I had held at a high intellectual regard for a long time. And I'm wondering if you had any like experience with his work at all, or if that was a part of your life or not.
Well, so I was raised in this really strict Mormon context, and so someone like Hitchens would have been like a terrifying person to discover. For, they would have been someone who would be talked poorly about, and like he was an evil person within the communities that I was raised in, right? As I learned about who Hitchens was and his, the things he espoused, I found him interesting. I think I was just on a different journey. I think letting go of Christianity for me was about letting go of colonization and the damage that Christianity caused throughout the world, and particularly in the regions where I live and work. The way it's devastated those communities. So, but as the song mentions, communion and ceremony are still super important within the indigenous communities that I work in. So it was not, I was never looking to let go of God. I was looking to let go of the control that Christianity used to, the control that Christianity wielded, I guess, over indigenous peoples. That's what I was trying to let go of more than spirituality. I guess I'm saying is still extremely important to me. And I think along with the idea of living in balance with the earth around us, the way the indigenous groups of those areas lived, I think understanding the spiritual connection to the earth is really important as well. So I was not, I guess I was on a slightly different journey than you. I think we had a lot of similarities in terms of thinking Christianity was the thing and then kind of having our minds blown that it wasn't. I relate to your journey in that way, but Hitchens wasn't necessarily a huge figure for me. So when I started hearing all the allegations about, I guess not allegations, but when you started hearing about the ways that he thought and the New Atheist thought about people that didn't align with mine, it was a really easy thing to kind of let go of for me.
Yeah.
I was heavily invested in it.
And I dug a little bit into some of Hitchens's other work as well. And I was like, is this a standalone thing where he was like particularly salty about one experience in his life, and that just led to this essay? And then, as I mentioned to you earlier, off air before we were recording, I was digging into some of his other stuff about, indigenous issues and where that pops up in his writing. And I found in his memoir, Hitch 22, that came out not that long before his cancer diagnosis and passing, is that he's got a line in his memoir where he would substitute the word dick for other words in famous book titles. And he says, this is a quote now from the book: "Some of the results are in fact mildly funny. I left my dick in San Francisco, bury my dick at Wounded Knee, dick of darkness." So he's got this, he says it's mildly funny as well. So he's got this, instead of bury my heart at Wounded Knee, it's bury my dick at Wounded Knee. And so this is like not something that he seems to have adjusted with or aged well over the rest of his career.
Yeah, it's disappointing when a thought leader, but it's it's kind of what I was saying about not knowing if I should even trust Chris with my mind. You don't want to be completely you don't want to have heroes in that way where you just follow everything they say. You have to be able to think for ourselves and judge what they're saying. And that doesn't mean his other writings are worthless, right? Like there's
right.
That's the tricky thing about art and artists and all this stuff is understand. And I think that I was always, I deal with that in film a lot. A lot of my film heroes have been exposed for being terrible people over the last few years. And so it's like, I think where you draw that line between art and artists is always a personal choice. And some people can separate those things, others cannot. And I don't have a judgment either way. I think, that just has to be, but there's a lot of good to be taken from Hitchens' writings, I'm sure, as well, regardless of his really unfortunate stances on some things that are close to me.
Yeah, there's a professor in the US. He's an anthropology of religion professor named Jeremy Cohen, and he is a Propaganda fan. He follows the podcast. He wrote an essay in 2017 called Christopher Hitchens, An Ode to False Idols, where he takes what Propaganda did in their song, and he writes a little bit about what Hitchens has done in his work. And he's like, basically, the gist of the article that I walked away with is that everybody needs to figure out their own comfort level about cherry picking what you like and discarding other things from people whose work you read. And essentially, it's just good intellectual exercise to be able to, seek to find good, but also to, move on essentially from things that you're like, this is not okay with me.
Right. That's really interesting. Yeah, it is. I think it's definitely a personal journey we all have to go on at some point, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Aukai, I am like really just delighted by this conversation that we've had today. Is there any of the like things that you wanted to throw out there for the listeners to check out, or places where they can find you, or final thoughts about Comply Resist? I mean, this has just been an absolutely wonderful couple hours hanging out with you.
Awesome. Thank you. I hope I know it's kind of a little all over the place. So hopefully people were interested and can follow where I was going with some of those ideas. No, the song, I'm glad you guys are going to go through it verse by verse, word by word, because I think it's all really important stuff. And we could talk about each of these lines in depth, and I hope you do, and I'm excited to hear the conversation that you guys have about it. It's an important song for the communities that I engage with, and I'm just really grateful that it exists in the world, and I'm really grateful that Propaganda exists, and I'm grateful your podcast exists. So thank you to all for that.
I do have another question too, actually.
Yeah, let's do it.
Because you make a really important point about the lyrics, and we've got the song title itself, Comply Resist, and then we've got the words in here that I'm really curious to hear your reaction to. Comply Resist, no difference. Resist, comply, you die.
Yeah.
And the worship line, you don't worship us. Oh, why don't you worship us? Resist, comply, you die. And I'm just curious on your reaction to these lines. I'm embarrassed that I tried to finish the conversation without asking you this, by the way. This is all staying in.
Oh, it's fine. Well, yeah, I mean, I think I learned this just from Chris's Patreon, but I think the resist, comply, you die is probably more directed toward the Black Lives Matter movement, but it is applicable to a lot of the settler colonial history that has transpired within the Americas and the Pacific and many, many other places. It's just, I think the idea of manifest destiny that still is really pervasive in the West is just kind of this idea, just like, people thought the sun would never set on the British Empire. There's a certain sense that America is inevitable. And I don't think that's true. I think we've seen it's taken a while, but the British finally left Fiji. The Germans left Samoa. The French are still in Tahiti. The Americans are still in Hawaii. But we see places like Barbados finally removed the Queen. Jamaica finally removed the Queen. Change can happen, and I think the restoration of the Hawaiian Kingdom is like a place where a lot of that effort is being put right now. That America should not be there. The Pacific needs to be demilitarized and decolonially. You know what I'm trying to say. You all know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
No, but I think that the inevitability of that it's just kind of like, doesn't matter what you do, it's inevitable. And I think that's what they want you to believe. And I would just say, don't believe it, like, from the perspective of colonialization, like, we have to fight back, we have to resist. Our culture is our resistance, and we have to fight for this stuff. And I think now, I don't know now if that applies to black teens who are being pulled over for wearing a hoodie or whatever the situation, like, maybe I don't know. Well, I don't know what to do. I don't know what we do for them. And it's a sad, terrible situation that's going on in the United States, with policing, and it's a really complicated subject. It's a whole separate conversation for me, but it's really awful that is the case. That whether you comply or resist, your fate seems to remain the same. It's rough. You don't worship us away. Don't you worship us? That was the kind of line there was a couple places in the song where I had been hearing that wrong all these years, and so I kind of recorded it a little bit different when I did my version of it. And just because I was like, oh, that's what it says. Oh, I thought it's so I just kind of recorded the version that I thought, because what I liked about because that was a big thing, right? The Captain Cook, he came to Hawaii, immediately brought mosquitoes there. So first of all, F him just for bringing mosquitoes. Like, that sucks. But also brought, a lot of disease, sexually transmitted diseases and otherwise, to the islands. From that moment on, there was, he believed that he was worshipped as a god. And that was another thing that happened when missionaries went to Aotearoa, New Zealand. One of the chiefs saw the coming of the missionaries as some fulfillment of prophecy. And the word of that was used as a way to baptize and convert people throughout the rest of the Pacific. There's this idea that the white man is God. And I think a lot of that is because we're being told these stories through white history. And I think the stories that are passed down through our stories, or the history that's passed down through our stories, at least in the Pacific, does not align with kind of the Western history book versions of worshiping the white man. And the reason I liked the way I recorded it and the way I'd always heard it was that it sounded very diminutive. Oh, don't you worship us? Oh, you cute little sweetie. Like, that's kind of how I saw it, as diminishing these little silly islanders who worship us. Like, don't worship us. We're not the gods. Worship this Christian God. They'll keep you in line. But anyway, that's kind of how I take that section.
Amazing. Well, is this your favorite song on Victory Lap?
Not even close, actually.
Why? Tell me your favorite.
Well, I love the lyrics because they speak to me personally so much. And I know, Chris thinks this is like a perfect song, which is great. I think, like, it's so funny because I think songs that I maybe wouldn't have given as much attention to because of your podcast, like Call Before You Dig, has become like a kind of a favorite that I wouldn't have
I am obsessed with Call Before You Dig. I love that song.
Cop Just Out of Frame is one I would love to hear Crash Test Dummies cover.
Oh,
like, every time I hear the beginning of that, I'm like, what if the singer of Crash Test Dummies was singing? This would be so hilarious.
Yeah, dude, they're from Winnipeg too.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Let's get the cover going on that. No, the one, I'm a father, and so Adventures in Zoocosis completely wrecks me every time I think about it, let alone listen to it.
Yeah.
I know it's maybe I've heard that the band thinks it's not quite finished, or maybe not its best version. So I would say, hey, make another version on the next stuff. Let's try it again. Like, I love that song. It's one of my absolute all-time favorite propaganda songs. So many. There's so many I love on this album, but I would probably say Zoocosis is my favorite if I had to pick one.
Amazing. Okay, well, through Zoocosis, I recently realized that I think that one of my only
Victory Lap, the song Victory Lap is also amazing too. Obviously.
Amazing. Like Zoocosis, I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, man, what is my like major need in life? And I feel like one of the major needs that I have is that I die before my child. You know what I mean? I was like, Zoocosis like made me have this like complete life or death existential crisis fairly recently. And I was like, wow, I feel like out of all the things in the world that I need, that's one of the things that are like top 3 needs for the rest of my life, you know?
Yeah. And I need, totally. That's
Is to be
crazy.
survived.
That's a heavy idea.
I know, man. To be survived by your children, like that's like that's one of the things that I got that's hitting me in the heart lately. So I'm glad to hear your ranking there, Victory Lap, the LP itself as a whole. But some of those ones, man, like Cop Just Out of Frame, I think is probably my favorite song on the record. Which is hilarious because it's the first song we ever did, and I've never revisited it on the podcast. But I'm like, every time I hear it, I'm like, this is completely perfect. But anyway, that's my little tangent. But Aukai, where can folks find you if they want to follow along with your life and work or get in touch?
I'm on Twitter, but I don't really use it anymore. I don't know. I kind of burned out on it.
Yeah.
The only place I'm really at now is on Instagram. At Aukai VT. It's AUKAI VITI. And I post there occasionally. I'm not really super online. I'm making a couple films right now, so when those come out, I'll be doing more socials to promote them. But that's the main place I'm at, is on Instagram at Aukai VT. I'm also on Twitter at Aukai VT, but I use it less frequently. And I'm also on Letterboxd, because I did a movie podcast for 7 years, so I have a lot of people who are interested in whatever random movie I've been watching lately. But you can find me there. I would love it if people would. And I'm doing more of this kind of musical project now. Like I said, this is the proof of concept. It's allowing me to recruit Pacific Islanders who play heavy music to embark on this journey. And I'm doing a little EP called Bamboo Propaganda. Bamboo Propaganda. That's going to be 2 covers of some propaganda songs and 2 covers of this hip hop artist named Bamboo.
Amazing.
And then then after that, originals. So I hope people will check out this little musical idea I had of kind of a Pacific punk protest music thing that right now we're calling Savage Nobles. Kind of a play on the Noble Savage idea, but I'm super excited about it. So check that out there. And my film work is also there. And check out Life Below Zero, First Alaskans, but please be super aware for this community. Like, there's a lot of death on it. The mouse likes blood, and it's respectfully done, and it's within these cultures, but it's not for everybody. And I really, really warn people, like, it's explicit. So please tread lightly if you're going to go down that path.
Cool. Well, Aukai, thank you so much for joining me, and thank you so much for committing to make this unbelievable piece of music that you've made, like, to send me for this podcast. I'm so grateful for not only the conversation, but also your efforts into making the music, because what a thrill. I'm so glad that you got to hang out with your friends and do something awesome like that, and so creative. Thanks for being here, man. It's just been a true delight.
Absolute pleasure. Love the podcast. Congratulations and thank you.
Tree, where it says to lay deploy, true it says to lay extract, and it says to lay destroy. You don't worship us, so why don't you worship us?